Imagine standing in the center of everything you have ever built. 400 people surround you dressed in silk and tailored wool. Champagne flows like water. Your name is on the invitation. Your face is on the cover of magazines. Your designs have reshaped city skylines across 3 continents. And the woman beside you is beautiful and brilliant and exactly the kind of partner that makes sense for the life you have constructed. Now imagine raising your glass to accept a toast. Imagine the room beginning to applaud. Imagine feeling for one brief moment like you have finally arrived at the destination you have been running toward for 6 years. And then imagine the doors opening. Imagine the laughter near the entrance fading. Imagine heads turning one by one like dominoes falling in slow motion. Imagine the ripple of silence moving through the crowd, faster than sound. And imagine turning around and seeing her. The woman who disappeared from your life 6 years ago without explanation. The woman you loved more than you have ever loved anything before or since. The woman you spent years hating because hating her was easier than admitting you never stopped wanting her. She is standing just inside the doorway. She is not dressed for this occasion. She is not scanning the room for attention. She is not performing for anyone. She is looking directly at you. And in that single moment, everything you thought you knew about your past comes crashing down around you. Have you ever had someone walk back into your life at the worst possible moment? Have you ever seen your history standing in front of you wearing a simple dress and an expression you cannot read? Have you ever felt 6 years collapse into nothing in the space of a single heartbeat? If you want to know why she left and why she came back and what happens when the past refuses to stay buried, then you need to stay with me until the end of this story. Because what this man is about to discover will change everything he thought he understood about love and sacrifice and what it really means to let someone go. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, make sure you subscribe to Infinite Love Tales by Mr. White and hit that notification bell. The story you are about to hear will take you through every emotion imaginable, and I promise you will not want to miss a single moment. Now let me take you back to the beginning of that evening. Let me show you the life Dominic Ashford had built in the 6 years since Mara Vance walked out of his world. The gallery opening was held in a converted maritime warehouse on the waterfront, the kind of space that had once smelled like salt and diesel and honest labor. Now it smelled like expensive perfume and catered hors d'oeuvres and the particular fragrance of money being quietly exchanged. The walls that had once held shipping manifests now displayed architectural renderings worth more than most houses. Steel beams that had supported cargo now supported installation pieces that critics called visionary and revolutionary, and other words that meant expensive. 400 guests moved through the space like choreographed dancers, investors in hand-stitched suits, critics with carefully cultivated opinions, journalists looking for angles, society figures looking to be seen, everyone who mattered in the world of architecture and design, and the money that made both possible. And at the center of it all stood Dominic Ashford. He was 32 years old. He had started with nothing. His father had driven a delivery truck until his back gave out. His mother had cleaned office buildings at night while he did his homework on the kitchen table. He had put himself through architecture school on scholarships and stubbornness and the kind of hunger that comes from knowing exactly what poverty tastes like. Now he stood in a room full of people who had never known hunger at all, and they were celebrating him. His designs had won international competitions. His buildings had been featured in publications around the world. His name had become synonymous with a particular kind of elegant precision, clean lines, impossible angles, spaces that made people feel both small and infinite at the same time. He had done everything he had set out to do. He had become everything he had promised himself he would become. And if you looked at him from the outside, you would see a man who had arrived, a man who had won, a man who had everything. But if you looked closer, if you knew what to look for, you might notice that his smile never quite reached his eyes. You might notice that he held his champagne glass like a prop rather than a drink. You might notice that even in a room full of people celebrating his success, he seemed somehow separate from all of it, like a man standing behind glass. Beside him stood Irina Volkov. She was 34. A curator who had built her reputation on discovering artists before anyone else recognized their value. She had an eye for potential, and a mind for strategy, and a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. She wore a midnight blue dress that, architectural in its own construction, Sharp angles, precise tailoring, the kind of garment that looked simple until you realized how much skill had gone into making it look that way. They had been together for 8 months. Their relationship made sense to everyone who observed it. Two ambitious people building parallel empires. Two minds that understood achievement. Two hearts that had learned to function efficiently rather than extravagantly. She touched his arm. A senator was approaching with his wife. Dominic shifted into the version of himself that these occasions required. Charming, but not eager. Confident, but not arrogant. Grateful, but not surprised. He had learned to perform success so well that most days he almost convinced himself it was real. A toast was forming. Someone was tapping their glass with a silver knife. The sound cut through the conversation like a blade. Heads turned toward the small stage where his business partner was preparing to speak. Dominic lifted his glass. Irina moved closer to his side. The room settled into anticipatory silence. And then the doors opened. He did not hear them open. He felt it. A shift in the atmosphere like pressure dropping before a storm. The particular quality of attention that moves through a crowd when something unexpected enters the space. The laughter near the entrance faded first. Then the conversation. Then the clinking of glasses and the shuffle of feet. Silence spread through the room like ink through water. Dominic turned. She was standing just inside the doorway. Still, quiet, not posed, not performing. Just standing there with the kind of presence that comes not from trying to be seen, but from being completely indifferent to whether anyone sees you at all. She wore a charcoal dress, simple to the point of severity, no jewelry. Her dark hair was longer than he remembered, pulled back from her face in a way that made her look older, steadier, like someone who had learned to carry weight without advertising it. She was not scanning the room. She was not looking for anyone, except she was looking directly at him. Their eyes met across 400 people and 60 feet of polished concrete floor. And in that single moment of contact, Dominic felt 6 years of carefully constructed walls begin to crack. Mara. The name left his lips before he could stop it. Barely a whisper, barely anything at all. But Irina heard it. The senator heard it. The woman standing 3 feet away with a glass of sparkling water definitely heard it. If you are feeling the tension right now, I want you to hit that like button, because trust me, this is just the beginning. What happens next will shake you to your core. Mara did not smile. She did not wave. She did not move toward him or away from him. She simply held his gaze for one long, suspended moment. And in that look was everything. Every conversation they never finished. Every question he never got to ask. Every night he spent staring at the ceiling, wondering what he had done wrong. Every morning he woke up reaching for someone who was no longer there. 6 years of silence. 6 years of anger. 6 years of building an empire, partly to prove something to a woman who had vanished without explanation. All of it collapsed into a single moment of eye contact. Then, without a word, she turned and walked back toward the exit. Just like that. Gone. The room remained frozen. Conversations had stopped mid-sentence. Glasses had stopped mid-sip. The toast that had been about to begin hung suspended in the air like an unfinished thought. Dominic set his champagne down on the nearest surface. His hand was steady. The rest of him was not Dominic. Irina's voice was low, controlled, a warning wrapped in a single word. Give me a minute. This is your opening. This is your night. I know what it is. He was already moving. He did not run. Running would have been too obvious. Running would have given away too much. He walked with purpose across the polished floor, past the investors, past the critics, past the 400 people who had come to celebrate his success and were now watching him walk away from it. Someone called his name. He did not stop. Someone touched his arm. He did not slow. He pushed through the heavy doors and stepped out into the night. The waterfront air hit him like cold water, sharp, clean, carrying the smell of salt and diesel and the distant sound of water against dock pilings. The evening had settled into that particular shade of blue that comes just after sunset, when the world has not quite committed to darkness, when everything exists in a state of transition. She was standing at the top of the stone steps that led down to the boardwalk. Her arms were crossed loosely, not against the cold, against whatever came next. She was looking out at the harbor, at the boats nodding gently in their slips, at the lights of the city reflected and fractured on the dark water, at nothing in particular and everything at once. He stopped a few feet behind her, close enough to speak, far enough to give her space. "You walked into my opening." He said it without accusation, without anger, just the fact of it, enormous and unexplained. "I know," she said it without turning, "and now you are leaving. I was always going to leave." "Then why come at all?" She turned, and up close 6 years had not aged her so much as refined her. The softness he remembered, that quality of uncertainty she used to carry in her shoulders, the small crease between her brows when something bothered her, all of it was gone. Whatever she carried now, she carried it quietly, privately, in places he could not see. That bothered him more than he expected. "I did not come to make a scene," she said. "I came to return something." She reached into the small bag at her side. What she placed in his palm weighed almost nothing, but he knew it before he looked down. The key, not just any key, the key to the studio apartment above the bookstore on Meridian Street, the apartment where he had lived 7 years ago, when he was 25 and burning through savings and sleep in equal measure, trying to finish his first real design project, trying to prove to himself and everyone else that he was more than his circumstances. The apartment where she had sat on the floor, surrounded by his sketches, organizing them into categories he could not see, telling him which ones had something real in them and which ones were just noise. The apartment where he had given her this key on a Thursday in March, laughing because he did not have a speech prepared, and she had told him speeches were just fear dressed up as formality. He stared at it in his palm, small, ordinary, heavy with meaning. "I have kept it long enough," she said quietly. "Mara, I am not here to complicate your life, Dominic. I just needed you to have it back." She glanced toward the gallery doors where light spilled out onto the stone steps. "Go back inside. They are waiting." He did not move. "You do not get to do that," he said. "You do not get to show up after 6 years and hand me a piece of our history like it is lost property and then just walk away like nothing happened." Something moved across her face. Not pain exactly, more like recognition, like she had rehearsed for this moment 1,000 times and was still surprised by how different it felt in real life. "I know this is not fair," she said. "You left," he said, and there it was, the thing that had lived under his ribs for 6 years, finally spoken aloud. "You left without explaining, without warning, without anything, and I spent a very long time trying to figure out what I did wrong." "You did not do anything wrong." "Then why?" She looked at him. The harbor stretched out below them, dark and patient and indifferent to human drama. A ferry moved slowly across the water in the distance. Its lights reflected and fractured on the surface. "Some things," she said slowly, "are more complicated than right or wrong. That is not an answer." "No," she agreed. "It is not." She turned toward the steps, and he saw her shoulders shift in that particular way that meant she was preparing to walk away. That meant she was going to leave him standing here with a key in his hand and 6 years of questions still burning in his chest. "I am asking you to stay," he said. 5 minutes, that is all." She stopped. For a long moment, she stood perfectly still, her back to him, the city spread out below them, the sound of the party continuing inside, muffled, distant, belonging to a different world. Then slowly she turned around. 5 minutes. They walked down the stone steps together. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them touched. They moved toward the boardwalk with the kind of careful distance that comes from carrying too much history to acknowledge all at once. The waterfront was quieter here, away from the gallery, away from the crowds. The tourists had thinned out as evening settled in. The space belonged mostly to locals and seagulls and the sound of water against wood. They stopped at the railing, looking out at the harbor, the same view she had been studying from the top of the steps, but different now, shared. A boat motor hummed somewhere in the darkness. A car passed on the street behind them. Its headlights briefly illuminated them both before moving on. "You want to know why I left?" she said. "It was not a question. I have wanted to know for 6 years." She was quiet for a moment, gathering something. When she spoke, her voice was steady in the way that only comes from having said something to yourself so many times. It stops feeling like confession and starts feeling like fact, 4 weeks before I disappeared. She said, I went to the doctor. Dominic felt something in his chest go very still. I had been tired for months. She continued, not normal tired. The kind of tired that sleep does not fix. The kind that makes you feel like you are moving through water all the time. I thought maybe I was anemic. Maybe I needed vitamins. Maybe I was just working too hard. She paused. It was not any of those things. The word she did not say hung in the air between them. Heavy, terrible, explaining everything and nothing all at once. They found a mass, she said. Ovarian. They did not use the word cancer right away, but they did not have to. I could see it in how carefully they chose their other words. I could see it in the way they looked at me when they thought I was not paying attention. Dominic felt the railing under his hands. Cold metal, solid, real, something to hold on to while the world rearranged itself around him. The timeline they gave me was aggressive. Surgery first, then chemotherapy. If the surgery went well, 6 months minimum, possibly a year, possibly longer. No guarantees about anything, no promises, just a long, uncertain road with no map and no destination. She looked at him. Her eyes were dry, but there was something in them that looked like the ghost of every tear she had cried when he was not there to see it. You should have told me, he said. His voice came out rough, barely controlled. I tried to imagine how that conversation would go. She said, I tried to picture telling you, and every version I could see ended the same way. What do you mean? She turned to face him fully, her hands still on the railing, her body angled toward his. The wind off the water lifted her hair slightly. If I told you I was sick, she said, you would have stopped everything. You would have put your entire career on hold. The commission you were working on, the design competition that could have made your name, everything you had been building toward for years. You would have walked away from all of it to take care of me. That was not your decision to make. No. She agreed. It was not, and I have lived with that every day since. She looked down at her hands on the railing. You were 26 years old, Dominic. You had one chance at that competition, one chance to prove that you could do something real, something that mattered. And I looked at us, at you, at me, at the situation, and I knew that if I told you, you would choose me. Of course I would have chosen you, and you would have lost everything. She said, everything you had worked for, everything you had sacrificed for, and somewhere down the line, maybe 5 years, maybe 10, you would have looked at me, and there would have been this tiny seed of resentment, so small you might not even have recognized it at first, but it would have been there, growing, spreading, poisoning everything we had. You do not know that. I know you, she said. I know that the thing you loved most about yourself was your work. I know that taking that away from you would have been like asking you to stop breathing, and I could not. She paused. I could not be the reason you gave up on yourself. The water moved against the dock pilings, steady, patient, indifferent to human grief. So I left. She said, I told you I needed space. I told you things were not working. I let you believe I had stopped loving you, because that was easier than the truth. And then I went through it alone. If this story is hitting you right now, I want you to drop a comment below. Have you ever had to let someone go for their own good? Have you ever made a sacrifice that no one else would ever understand? Let me know in the comments, because I believe many of you have been through something similar. Now, let me tell you what happened next. Dominic stood at the railing, his hands gripping the metal so hard his knuckles had turned white. The key was still in his palm, pressing into his skin, small and ordinary and suddenly heavy with 6 years of misunderstanding. The surgery, he said. 8 hours, she replied. They got most of it. Then 6 months of chemotherapy that felt like drowning slowly. I moved back to my sister's place upstate. I did not tell anyone except family, and I watched your career from a distance. His jaw tightened. I saw when you won the competition, she said. I saw the press coverage, the interviews, the profiles that called you a prodigy. I saw the buildings go up, one after another, your name getting bigger, your reputation growing. She smiled, and it was the saddest thing he had ever seen. I was so proud of you, she said, and so grateful that I had not taken any of it away from you. Dominic turned away from the water, his hands pressed flat against the railing. The city lights blurred slightly, whether from the moisture in the air or something else, he could not say. "You should have let me choose," he said. "Maybe," she said, "but I could not risk it." He thought about the 6 years since she had left, the anger that had driven him, the ambition that had consumed him, the walls he had built around himself so high and so thick that no one could get close enough to hurt him again. He had built an empire on the assumption that she had stopped loving him, that love had expiration dates, that the lesson was to never need anyone badly enough to let them become a weakness, and she had let him believe every word of it, so that he could become this. "I did it for you," she said quietly behind him. "I know that sounds like something people say when they want to justify their choices, but I gave up everything I wanted so that you could have everything you worked for. I did not want gratitude. I did not want you to know. She stopped. "I loved you enough to let you hate me. That was the only thing I could actually give you." He turned around. Her face was wet now, whether from the mist off the water or something else, and for the first time all night, she looked like the Mara he remembered. Not the composed woman who had walked into his gallery opening like a quiet disruption, not the stranger who had handed him a key with the detachment of someone closing a bank account. The woman who used to fall asleep on his shoulder during long drives. The woman who told him 7 years ago, in a cramped studio apartment, that she believed in him before he believed in himself. The woman who had looked at his earliest sketches and said, "There is something real here, even when no one else could see it." The treatment ended. He said, his voice rough, 5 years ago, and you still did not come back." She was quiet for a moment. The water filled the silence between them. "The treatment ending was not the only reason I stayed away," she finally said. "By the time I was declared in remission, by the time the doctors said the words cautiously optimistic, by the time I started to believe I might actually have a future again, you were already a different person." He waited. "The press was covering you constantly," she said. "You were on boards. You were speaking at conferences. You were building things I could not even understand from the outside. And I had to be honest with myself. About what? About whether the man I loved was still there," she said, "or whether he had been replaced by all of this." She gestured, not unkindly, not cruelly, at the gallery behind them, at the light spilling through the tall windows, at the faint sound of the party still continuing without him. "So, I built my own life," she said slowly. "Badly at first, then better. I made peace with losing you. Most days I even believed it. Most days," he repeated. She almost smiled. The almost was the worst part. "And then I heard about the engagement," she said, "and I realized I was still carrying your key. And I thought if I could just give it back, if I could close the loop properly, then maybe the last piece of it would finally let go." He looked down at his hand. The key sat in his palm, small and silver, and worn from years of being carried, waiting to be returned. "Mara," he said. "Do not," she said gently. "Whatever you are about to say, do not say it out here with your fiancé 50 feet away and 400 people waiting for you inside. She is not Dominic." Her voice was soft but firm. "Go back inside." He looked at her for a long moment, the key in his palm, her face in the dim light from the street lamps. The 6 years that separated them filled with everything he had not known and could not fix. Then he turned and walked back up the steps toward the gallery. The engagement party felt different when he walked back in, or maybe he was different, carrying something that did not fit inside a room full of polished surfaces and practiced smiles. The jazz had shifted to something slower. Guests parted slightly as he moved through them, reading his face the way people read weather, looking for signs of storm or clearing. Irina found him before he had made it 10 steps inside. She stepped in close, her voice low enough that only he could hear it. "Who is she?" "Someone I knew a long time ago." "That is not an answer." He looked at her. Irina was extraordinary, sharp, driven, honest in her own calculated way. He had never lied to himself about what they were building together. It made sense. It was sustainable. It was the kind of relationship that worked because both people understood the terms. "Her name is Mara," he said, "and she was the person I loved before any of this existed." Irina did not flinch. She never did. She processed information quickly, privately, coming out the other side with clarity. "And now," she asked. Now I need to be honest with you about something I did not fully understand until tonight. He paused, searching for words that would be true without being cruel. What we have is real, he said, but it was built on a version of me that had already given up on something, a version that had decided certain kinds of love were not worth the risk, and I do not think that is fair to you. She studied him for a long moment. Something moved behind her eyes, not devastation, but the quiet recognition of a truth she had perhaps already known and simply had not named. If you walk out that door, she said evenly, do not come back tomorrow to explain yourself. I will not need it. I know, he said. She nodded once. Composed, dignified, everything she had always been. Then she turned and walked toward a group of collectors with the same grace she brought to everything. He watched her go, feeling something that was not quite grief and not quite relief, something in between. Then he walked back out into the night. The boardwalk was empty when he returned. He stood where they had stood together and looked down the length of it, expecting nothing, prepared for nothing. Then he saw her. She was walking toward the parking lot, not hurrying, not rushing, her steps measured and steady, the kind of walking that comes from knowing exactly where you are going and being at peace with the destination. Mara, she stopped, did not turn immediately. When she did, she looked at him with an expression he could not name, something between hope and its opposite, something between door and window. You are supposed to be inside, she said. I ended it. He said, just now. A long pause, the wind off the harbor moving between them. Dominic, I know what you are going to say, he said. You are going to tell me this does not change anything, that you have built a life, that it has been 6 years and people are not the same people they were, and whatever we had belongs to a different version of both of us. She was quiet. Am I wrong? He asked. She looked at him steadily, her eyes reflecting the distant lights of the harbor. You are not wrong, she said. He exhaled, something between a laugh and its opposite. I spent 6 years being angry at you, he said, and I built everything I built, partly because of that anger, because I wanted to prove something, to you, to myself. I am not even sure anymore, and now you are telling me you sacrificed everything to protect me, and I do not. He stopped, searching for words that did not exist. I do not know what to do with that. You do not have to do anything with it. She said, that is what I came to tell you. I did not come here for an apology or a second chance. I came because I needed to stop carrying your key around like unfinished business. I needed to close the door properly. And now, it is closed, she said, simple, like a sentence that had been waiting years for its period. He looked at his hands, the key still sitting in his palm, small and ordinary, and suddenly representing everything. I let go of you, she said, her voice quieter now. A long time ago, even when it was the hardest thing I had ever done, even when it still hurt. She paused, steadying herself. I had to, because holding on would have meant losing myself in something that was already gone. Her eyes met his. Loving you and going back to you are two different things, she said, and I had to learn that the hard way. I know, he said. I had to learn how to live without you, she continued. And I did, and that life is mine now. I built it piece by piece, from the ruins of what we had, and I am not willing to dismantle it. She paused. Not even for you. He nodded slowly. He did not argue. He did not reach for her. He just stood there with the key in his hand, and let it be what it was. She stepped forward then, and for just a moment she reached up and pressed her hand against his cheek, her palm warm against his skin. A goodbye that did not need to be dressed up as anything else. I am glad you are okay, he said. I am glad you built something beautiful, she said. Then she lowered her hand, stepped back, turned toward the parking lot, and this time, he let her go. He watched her walk across the pavement, her silhouette growing smaller against the lights of the street, her footsteps fading into the sounds of the city, until she reached her car, until she opened the door, until the tail lights disappeared around the corner, and still he did not move. He stood alone on the boardwalk. Behind him, 400 people were still celebrating a future that no longer existed. Ahead of him, nothing had been decided yet. Nothing was certain. Nothing was clear. In his hand, a key that represented everything that had made him worth building. He closed his fingers around it, felt the metal warming against his palm, and for the first time in 6 years, the anger was gone. What was left was quieter, harder to name, but real in a way the gallery and the accolades and the strategic partnership had never been. He stood there until the wind changed direction, until the gallery began to empty behind him, until the key in his palm had warmed to the temperature of his skin. Then he walked back to his car, drove home to the apartment overlooking the city, and sat in the dark for a very long time. The next morning, he called his assistant and cleared his schedule for a month. He did not know what he was going to do with that time yet. He did not have a plan. He did not have a destination. But for the first time in 6 years, he was going to figure out who he was when he was not running from something. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. If this story moved you, I want you to subscribe to Infinite Love Tales by Mr. White and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story like this one. Because here is what I want you to take away from everything you just heard. Some sacrifices are made in silence. Some love is proven not by staying but by leaving. And not every love story ends in reunion. Some of them end in understanding. Mara did not walk back into his life to reclaim him. She walked back to release him, to give him back the piece of their history that had been weighing her down, to close the door properly so that both of them could finally walk through different ones. And Dominic did not chase her across that parking lot. He did not beg her to stay. He did not promise to change or to make it work this time. He let her go, because sometimes that is what love looks like. Not the desperate clinging, not the dramatic gestures, but the quiet recognition that two people can love each other deeply and still not be right for each other anymore. She had become someone new in the 6 years since she left, someone who had survived illness and rebuilt herself from the ruins of everything she had lost. And that person belonged to a life he had not been part of building. He had become someone new too. Someone whose success had been built on anger and ambition and the determination to never be hurt that way again. And that person had to decide whether he wanted to keep being that man or become someone different. Neither of them could go back to who they were 7 years ago in that studio apartment. Those people were gone, and the people they had become had earned the right to their own separate futures. That is not a sad ending. That is wisdom. Because the greatest love stories are not always the ones that last forever. Sometimes they are the ones that change us, the ones that teach us who we are capable of becoming, the ones that hurt enough to break us open and force us to rebuild ourselves stronger. Mara taught Dominic that he was worth believing in before anyone else saw his potential, and then she taught him that love sometimes means letting go so that the person you love can become everything they are meant to be. He will carry both of those lessons for the rest of his life, and maybe years from now, he will meet someone else. Someone who fits the man he is becoming rather than the man he used to be. Someone who did not know him when he was hungry and desperate and afraid of his own potential. And maybe Mara will continue building the life she fought so hard to create. The life she earned through 6 months of chemotherapy and 5 years of recovery and countless nights of learning to be whole without him. Or maybe their paths will cross again someday, under different circumstances, at a different time, when both of them have finished becoming who they are meant to be. The story does not tell us what happens next, because that is not the point. The point is that they both finally have the freedom to find out. So let me ask you something before we finish. Have you ever loved someone enough to walk away from them? Have you ever made a sacrifice that no one else would understand? Have you ever had to let go of something beautiful because holding on would have destroyed it? Drop a comment below and share your story. Because I believe that everyone watching this has carried something heavy at some point in their lives. And sometimes just knowing that other people understand makes the weight a little easier to bear. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think about the people you have loved and lost and learned from, then please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button. Subscribe to Infinite Love Tales by Mr. White. And know that every week I will be here with another story designed to remind you of the beautiful complexity of being human. Because love is never simple. It is messy and painful, and sometimes it asks us to do impossible things. But that is what makes it worth telling stories about. Until next time, remember that sometimes the people who leave us are not abandoning us. They are saving us. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is the freedom to become who they were always meant to be, even if it means watching them walk away.